Futurecast Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Good afternoon to our special viewers and participants here from the Club of Amsterdam. I'm with Dr. Hardy Schloer, and we are here to present our first special edition podcast of 2022 for the Club of Amsterdam and our good friend and colleague, Mr. Felix Bopp. This evening's podcast is going to center on quite a variety of different subjects and will last for about an hour. And although we've got quite a lineup of subjects to address, we'll get through as many of them as we can in the first hour or so. And again, as I said, this will be the first of other follow-up podcasts. Dr. Schloer, good evening. Good to have you here again. We've done a number of these together, and it's nice to be back doing another podcast with you.
Absolutely. Hello, Chris. Great to hear from you. Of course, for you, it's evening in Abu Dhabi. Here in Barcelona, it's still afternoon, and we are ready for an exciting hour, just as usual. I understand you got lots of questions and lots of comments and lots of subjects that you want to cover, so let's get right in.
Indeed, we do. So to kind of kick things off, Hardy, as you know, I think it's needless to say there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. We really live in unprecedented times, although I think we could probably say that at any point in time. However, there's probably never been a period of time, certainly in our modern world, where there has been so much conflict, so much polarization, not even between countries per se, but within our own countries. And this is really most prevalent in the Western countries. Certainly the United States is under its own attack, if you will. Europe's got its problems, the UK splitting off, so on and so forth. And we really are facing down the barrel of a new world order. I think it goes without saying that there's a sort of changing of the guard coming. And so I just kind of want to hand it over to you, Hardy, and have an open discussion here about where really do we sit today, what's going on, and what can we expect over the coming the balance of this decade.
Well, let's put the whole thing, first of all, in its bigger context. Now, the bigger context is we came out of a very similar period about 75 years ago, the end of World War II, which was sort of the end of a turmoil that started kind of with World War I and the big inflation, the stock crash, the great depression in the United States and the whole world depression. And then in the rise of ultra-conservatism, the rise of populism. One could argue that characters such as Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin and some others, Mussolini and so on, that they were also the first populists, the first real, true people mover. Today
on a global scale.
On a global stage, today, we call them fascists or this or that or the other thing. But obviously, we had this incredible move to a complete polarization of the world. I mean, World War II was the showdown of a complete polarization of the world. And there came many, many, many things together. Sort of the fatigue of colonialism, the rise of East versus West, Russia versus Europe, many, many, many things that all came together, including a breakdown of the financial systems, which started at the great crash, at 29 and so on. And then came the real final shocking moment when nuclear bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And that actually ended something, because everybody said at that point, never again. Everybody was shocked to their bones. We looked at, look, I grew up in the wakes of World War II. And I still remember when I was a small kid, I still remember houses with bullet holes from World War II, houses that were bombed out that had not yet been removed. So I remember the feeling that was at that time. And then what came about was this extreme liberal feeling, freedom, no more fascism, no more these ultra-conservative handcuffs that were built, that came out of this Prussian discipline kind of thinking and acting, especially in Germany. I grew up in Germany, obviously. So, and then we got into this beautiful 1950s, 1960s. And yes, there were all kinds of problems still. There were the Korean War and the Vietnam War and so on. But these were things we dealt with. For example, the Vietnam War, look at what happened in America. Look at Woodstock. Look at the great protests that came to Washington and so on and so forth. Because people said, no, we do not want that anymore. We want to be free. We actually want to live in a society in which we're proud of what we let people do, not what we forbid them to do. And so we gone through the 70s, which were, of course, almost exuberant. And then we got into the 80s, where the hippies became yuppies and where they made a lot of money, and where the rise of technology and the computer age and all of these things provided incredible opportunities. And then we got into the 90s, and then we got into 9/11. And 9/11 set again the stage to let's forget about all this being free. We need to control and rein in the people. And where you are today is, and you see that everywhere in the world. If you think that maybe Mr. Trump is the only populist in the world, you're quite wrong about that, because there were populists before him already in the Philippines. There were England certainly has a populist leader right now. He's a bit of a trouble right now, and I don't know if he's going to make it. But anyway, we have these very similar populist messages now everywhere in the world. Putin, who actually was a quite intelligent, eloquent speaker, and also took Russia in the early stage. I remember when Putin came to the Deutsche Bundestag, the German parliament, and he gave a 2-hour speech. I have that 2-hour speech on my computer because it's amazing. Here was a Russian leader coming to Germany and giving this incredible speech about, we got to be friends, we got to stick together, we got to help each other, we got to build together. We have, all of these things. And from that person that gave this 2-hour speech became, and we can argue there were reasons why he became that way, but he became now a oppressive person that is starting to wage again, after all these years since World War II, for the first time, a major war on European soil. So something has come to an end. something has come back full circle yet again to a movement exactly like we had it in the teens, the 20s, and the 30s. We are now having it now, but it also seems to be sort of in the same time space of about 30 years. And so what I do expect now is we are moving now into the hot phase of this change. And the hot phase obviously is war, is revolution, is all kinds of things. Now, yesterday, the US Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade. You may be on either side of the issue. We can talk later about that. I understand some of the people that called in had some questions about that, but it is just yet another example in how the institutions cannot prevent or actually even enforce this polarization that is now happening between people. You look at the United States is moving socially towards a complete showdown, a breakup. I would be not surprised if we would see in the United States on ballots the vote to exit the union. For example,
from
Texas.
State to state?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, or even whole clusters of states to go together to exit the union.
Do you think that's more likely, Hardy, or do you think that armed conflict within the country is more likely? Because ultimately, and you and I have talked a lot about this over the years. Our listeners haven't, but or at least not with us anyway. I think it's become more of a topic with people everywhere. But I think in the best of cases, and I agree 100% that the United States is, it's got a day of reckoning ahead of it. And it's just really a matter of how it happens, not if it will happen. And this, I mean, 12 years ago, you're the one that said that the 2016 presidential elections in the United States, if they happen at all, will be tumultuous. and at the time, I can be honest about this, at the time, I kind of chuckled and shaded my eyes. And here we go. The 2016 elections were tumultuous, and the 2020 elections were even more tumultuous. And I think
look at the 24. Look at the 24 election, and you will see something amazing. Now, you said armed conflict. Well, if I would have told you in the 1980s that there will be, within 6 weeks, there will be 7 mass shootings in America, you would have said, this is never, ever going to happen.
Yes, that's correct.
This is crazy. We are in the middle of an armed conflict. Yeah. It is just that we are somehow media manage this armed conflict. We have not a day going by where there isn't someone protest, white versus black, black versus white, poor versus rich, rich versus poor, conservative versus liberal, liberal versus conservative. I mean, we are already in the early stages of an armed conflict. However, it may be that the armed conflict is going to be intercepted with extraordinary powerful police force. I talked about this in a documentary that I did some years ago. Government is ready for this armed conflict between people, and I think our police force today doesn't look like a police force. Remember the good policeman that didn't even have a gun, he had a belly club, hanging on his belt. and he would walk the neighborhood, and he was there to protect and serve. Well, that is some romantic picture from a very distant past, because today the police force, they look like aliens. They look like ninja aliens. They have all this.
They look like cyborgs almost. Yeah.
Absolutely scary as hell. And so I think that the police force of nowadays is kind of designed to keep a lid on open violence. But that doesn't mean that we may not see hundreds or maybe even more than that, people at one point with guns, starting to storm, a building. Oh, wait a minute, that already happened on the 6th of January. What am I talking about, So you see these pockets of armed conflict. I mean, there were people walking with guns into the Capitol, and taking it over. So if that is not an armed conflict, I don't know what an armed conflict is. No? Well, we may think about something like the Civil War, where we had, but that was organized soldiers,
Right.
Now, will we see National Guards fight against each other? I don't want to say yes, because that even sounds for me a little bit on the edge. But is it possible? Absolutely. Yes, I think it's
well, I think even within the ranks of the U.S. military itself, you have a very divided group of soldiers, from West Coast to East Coast, and certainly the same will be true in the police force and all the other civil servants. In my view, I think where we're going to see armed conflict, and when I say armed conflict, I think that's a better term for civil war. I think the kind of armed conflict that will break out in the United States will be, as you mentioned, more, place to place, region to region, city to city, not so much as as an invasion from one place to another, that just lasts for a long time until the chips fall wherever they do. But and this is a scary thought, not just for the United States, Hardy, but for the world, right? I mean,
so here, that's the point now. So now we go to the world, okay? In the past, whether you believe it or not, or whether you find it a convenient truth or convenient fantasy, I don't care. But the fact is that over the last 75 years, maybe with the exception of the last few, but for the most part of the last 75 years, the United States was sort of a kind of elite model of thinking. Why? It was leading in art and culture, music, for example, television. I mean, what do you look, you can go wherever you want in the world. You turn on the television, and what do you watch? American movies. No? Yes, there is Bollywood, and yes, there is all this other stuff, but that's not the main stuff. Of course, you go to Turkey, they have they have more emphasis on their kind of stuff in their language and so on. But most of the stuff is U.S. music, is U.S. Culture, and then you go to technology. I'm sorry to say that. Yes, there's a lot of technology coming out of my country, Germany, for example, or Europe, or Russia, or Japan, or whatever have you. But come on, the real big tickets really is done in the US. One, they have managed to amass enormous amounts of cash due to the fact that they provided the world reserve currency, due to the fact that they were managing the global finance system, which also imposed colonialism 2.0, as I call it now, over all these countries that had resources that America would very cheap Patriot and then, you know, sell expensively to us. And so, yeah, you can come up with all these explanations, but on the end of the day, they are leading. On the end of the day, of the 30 top universities in the world, 25 are US. It's just that way. And while I, you know, needs to file a grant application in Europe, that probably, you know, takes forever to be granted, if at all, and is for a few $100,000. I file a grant application at Stanford University for a few million, and I can get that granted, you know, in a matter of weeks, because, you know, if you got something, you know, that really moves research and development forward, boom, it's done. It's efficient, it's quick. So that, however, is on a there's a big question mark now, if the United States can continue that, and if they cannot, and I believe they cannot. I believe the social breakup of the United States, the social war that is taking place in the United States, is weakened the country at its core, at a point where it stands to lose that leadership. Now, one can argue and say, we don't need America to be a leader. Well, if it's not America, it should be somebody else. It should be somebody that actually we are following, somebody that provides outstanding progress towards a sustainable world. Now, is what the United States is sustainable? Well, if you look at the top 1,000 sustainable technologies in the world, probably even so that America is creating the most pollution in the world and wastes the most resources and whatever have you, a vast majority of these 1,000 are American technologies, you know. So, but will it still hold on to all of that? No, because it's spreading now. It's
Well,
now.
it's going to have as you say, the social problems that exist in the United States will collapse the United States, certainly if it happens, and I believe it will, to a point where, you know, they've got their own fires to put out. I mean, you know, today and for the last, you know, 75 years, the United States has kind of been the world's fireman, the world's policeman, if you will. And, you know, for those of us in the West, obviously, we've been good with that because, you know, and over the course of human history too, Hardy, as you well know, I mean, there's always been a leader. There's always been a sort of a, you know, the big guy on the block. There's always been an empire, somebody that, you know, that creates the most gravity. And this is going to change. And so the topic that we've started with here is, you know, the change of the new world order. This is really what we're talking about, right? I mean, the disappearance.
So let me insert here this, okay? Because we're talking about where is the new world order going. I believe that in analysis of history, in 100 years from now, 200 years from now, or maybe even much sooner, people will point at the war in Iraq that was unprovoked, done on false assumptions, done with ulterior motives that became very, very clear, is probably the single event that brought about the decay of the United States as a long-term leader.
What would you say about, you know, because this brings us to the current point in time where, you know, it's construed by many that the greatest threat to Western democracy is now happening in Ukraine, of all places. And, you know, obviously this has really brought to light the Iraq war, the invasion of Iraq by the Americans. and there are some people that argue that, hey, the United States wasn't there to occupy. They were there to maybe impose the petrodollar or make sure that, the United States position with regard to, energy in the world maintained, as Saddam Hussein was threatening to sell Iraq's oil in currency other than the dollar, right? And that's the petrodollar is a whole nother story, and one that you and I have had many times. But now the war in the Ukraine, and this is, where you have sort of these competing views. War in Ukraine is a war to occupy. At least that is what appears. I mean, how do you speak to the people and say that, well, gosh, these are completely different scenarios. The United States wasn't looking to occupy, Russia is.
Yeah, obviously, first of all, I think what Russia is doing right now is a small version. I know what I'm saying now is very unpopular and probably hugely argued by all kinds of analysts. But honestly, I'm trying to be sympathetic to both sides of the issues, because I can honestly say I'm never invested into one view or another. I really try to see where is here the balance of things. But yeah, I fail with all the horrible aggression in which Russia is moving into the Ukraine right now. I don't see how that compares even with over 1 million dead people in Iraq, and this is just one of many sort of interventions that the United States did. And again, I hear the arguments why that was important, why that was good, why that was great, why that was the American century or whatever they thought that was going to be. I hear all of these things, but on the end of the day, and then maybe we should move on to some other subjects, but the first subject was the world order. Well, the world order is breaking down, and the world order must break down in order for something sustainable to emerge again, just like it did in 1945, 46, 47, when we came off these horrific things that took place in Japan and in Europe. Europe was completely bombed in pieces. We need to look at the probability even of a much bigger conflict than the one we see right now, that is military on all levels, socially on all levels, and so not just the United States, but look at Europe. Look at what's happening in Spain right now. Extremely diversified views, very liberal and extraordinarily right-wing conservative. Fox, for example, Le Pen in France, and then look at Denmark, Holland. all of these areas, Poland, Eastern Europe, throughout. Yes, absolutely. We are in the process of breaking. It's just that the news isn't putting all of that together, because this doesn't make very good news. So they focus on single events, and nobody really puts it for the people into context. But the context really is that the whole world right now is burning, and it's not yet exploding, but there are, and that is where there is a big question mark and a big warning about that, because I'm not yet convinced that we make it past the next 20 years as a human race. And that adds another subject which we haven't talked about, and I understand you have later on some questions, calling questions on that. Climate change, climate emergency, where it's just a perfect storm of things that are coming together. So we become socially unhinged and polarized. We become geopolitically extraordinarily polarized, and the aggressive tone is going up. So when you, for example, measure the language that is out there that deals with the use of nuclear weapons, or tosses around concepts such as limited nuclear war, which is nonsense. There cannot be a limited nuclear war, but people begin to believe that that is possible in order to bridge easier to use one of these nukes. So if that is happening, fortunately, the World War II ended by using the first two of these things that were built ever. And we stopped because we were shocked. I'm not quite sure that we will end this time when the first nuke falls, or the first two. I think it will be only an encouragement where everybody is coming out. China, India, Pakistan, Russia, United States, England, France, everybody is going to go into the mix. And then we have just other storms. Africa is in a huge storm. Africa obviously rejects colonialism 2.0. It's the whole new way of how we colonialize Africa. They want that to come to an end. I think they understand that their resources are valuable. No?
And it is. I mean, by virtue of the fact that, we have Prince Charles in Africa now talking about, the wrongs of the past and how to reconcile. And but
so the final sentence I want to say on that subject, to just put the lid on it, we are in a late stage escalation of a circle that always goes from extreme liberal to extreme right wing, back to extreme, and so on. We are about 5 minutes before 12 or 7 minutes before 12 when the big bang happens that hits the reset button, and where everybody says, whoa, where are we going? And that reset button, by the way, can come from climate emergencies, can come from an escalation of the Russian-European conflict, can come from the United States breakdown, can come from everywhere. There are right now probably about 8 or 10 scenarios one could create that bring about the final blowout of what is the current world order. So get ready for a big storm, but hopefully, if you survive that storm, hopefully we have a completely new rebirth of a much better and more peaceful and sustainable world. And I believe that is possible.
Final question on this subject before we get into a couple of the other subjects. Provided any one of these 8 or 10 flashpoints actually do occur, and I think it's unquestionable that some or one or more of them will. I think part of that flashpoint in whatever triggers it will be the United States. What does the world look like post Western dominance, post meltdown of the United States? Even if they do hold it together without a fracturing of the country, the world's population growth, the majority of it is in the East. We know that one of the underlying problems with the West is demographics, and the fact that birth rates are so low, and in the other side of the world, the East, if you will, birth rates are very high, and this is where the population is growing, and this is where critical mass is being created. What does the world look like after this next event, whatever it may be?
For the United States,
For the world.
it is, well, let's look at it through the various lenses, because through each lens, the world looks different, obviously. No?
Surely, yep.
Let's look at how much influence will the US have in the future. If the United States can hold on to their technological leadership, then they will have a great chance in the next sequel after the big breakdown of the current world order to have a rebirth in which they once again could arise as a leader. They could.
Would they need to stay together as 50 states, or could it work as a
No, I think it will be almost better for the United States to become, I don't know, more a little bit more fragmented, so that those that feel comfortable and good in a very
conservative ideology,
conservative world have the chance to move to states or to places where they feel good about that, and those that want to be super liberal and wants to live a very liberal lifestyle and with free love, free drugs, like they had in the 1960s, they can go to other states like San Francisco or some places in New England or wherever. So and that is very interesting, because the conservatives claim that Roe versus Wade strike down yesterday was actually progress. And why was it progress? They say it does not say that we take away abortions from women. It says that we give to the individual states the right to say you can or you cannot.
Right.
Whatever the majority of that state says. Now, I'm not agreeing with that logic, but I'm saying that's what they say.
That's correct.
And so they actually say, we actually executed democracy. We actually gave now the choice to the individual areas. And this converges completely with my picture about the breakup of the United States, which I had for a very long time, as you know, where we have social pockets such as Missouri and Mississippi and Atlanta and Alabama and Georgia and so on, Kentucky, where they can exercise that extreme conservative lifestyle, where they can make the Bible be their most important leading doctrine, of how they behave and how their courts act and so on and so forth. And then there'd be other areas in the United States where it's not. The question is whether in that checkerboard of extremes, the technological development still can move. And I would venture to say that technology thrives more in liberal environments than in conservative environments. Education thrives more in liberal environments than in conservative environments. So by actually polarizing more, you would actually create a even stronger base on the liberal side for technology development and for progress in education and so on and so forth. And this may be helping as a whole the North American leadership in the world, because the future of the world is technology. It's not money.
Mm.
It's not weapons or warfare as such. It's not even diplomacy. It's technology. And I very strongly believe that the trend to manage the world will be more and more AI-based and more technology-based. And I know we are now moving into another subject that you have for later on this talk, but this is what this connects.
Technology touches on all of these things that you've just mentioned. And
yes, absolutely. So yeah, the world order, as we know it, is something that is dragged along since World War II, and so the new world order soon will be an old world order, because there will be the world order of technologized and technology-based management of this planet. And if it comes on time, and if it is sustainable and promotes sustainable technology and really deals with the climate emergency as it needs to be, then we have a chance. If it doesn't, this planet, for one, it will turn into Venus. I think last time I checked, the surface temperature of Venus is about 700 degrees. Not very cozy. Not a good weather to go to the beach. So
I can tell you that here in the Emirates right now, it's about 50 degrees, and there aren't very many people at the beach today. So at 700, I think you're spot on.
Well, this was also more jokingly said now, but yeah, I mean, again, all of these things stick together, and all of these things intertwined, with where we're going. You cannot look at the world order without looking at climate change, and without looking at technology and education and racial issues and all of these things. So anyway, it's said enough. Please go on to your next question.
Okay, well, the next question, or the next topic rather, is really is something that we've already touched on just momentarily, and that is the role of cash, the role of currency, the role of money in the world today. And this is all part of what has brought the world to where it is now. And we had some mention of the petrodollar system, and the U.S. currency. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, and the role that money plays, not just in our economy, but in geopolitics, in our social structures, so on and so forth. And in the world today, the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, kind of almost by default. Of course, Kissinger and his striking of the petrodollar deal back in the 1970s, is still largely construed to have been the greatest foreign policy achievement ever in the history of the world. It ensured that the U.S. dollar would remain the world's reserve currency for quite some time, although we're starting to see that weaken. Now, the interesting thing is that there really aren't any other currencies in the world today except for the euro and the British pound that really could serve in that purpose. The British pound did previously, of course. The euro has its own problems, and all of the other Eastern currencies, the Chinese currency, the Russian currency, couldn't possibly serve in this capacity at this point in time, because they're simply not transparent enough. And for a currency to be considered as a reserve currency for the entire world, we kind of have to have very high degree of transparency. That's universally agreed. What is the role of cash and currency, money, especially with the rise of cryptocurrencies and the continued pressure, and well, as we all know, the very outdated financial system that we have, that is just, we're standing right on the precipice of another collapse. Is this collapse that is coming with the rising interest rates and all of the sell-off in stock markets? is this the next 2008 or 1929? And if so, what happens with cryptocurrencies? Where do they fall or rise in the mix? What happens with the global financial system?
So here is an interesting trend. Again, big trends. No? We always got to look at the dynamics of all of these things. There's something really interesting, and nobody has talked about this yet. But what we see in the early stages emerging is special application money. Tokens you can use for a very specific purpose that can be only earned in a very specific way. This is an interesting thing, because before in the fiat, you could just spend any amount of money in any currency that was convertible into another currency on anything. This system is weakening. And by the way, the only reason why we still have this system is because we don't have enough people yet to buy in on another system. But that other system, whether you want to or not, is a trend of creating the token economies. And cryptocurrencies are only one facet of these token economies. And what happens more and more is that actually companies think of certain ways in where you can earn or buy or obtain tokens, credits, whatever you want to call them.
Well, this is already happening now.
Yeah. But that is only the detection of the trend. Mm-hmm. This will be going much, because people, really clever people, begin to figure out that this is a whole new way in how you control the economy. Imagine that you have to have oil tokens in order to buy oil. Mm-hmm. You cannot buy it with bread tokens or with Microsoft's computer software tokens. No, you need oil tokens for that. And these oil tokens can only be earned in a certain way, and they can only be distributed in a certain way, and they are handled on the oil token exchange. I'm making all this stuff up right now, but this is where we are going to, okay? The new world is thousands of hidden or open exchanges of mitigating between all these special types of money, all these special types of value tokens that you can apply only in this way or that way, and only at this time, but not at that time, and only if you have that kind of KYC checkout, and not if you have another one. And this is then how we learn how to keep these groups out, or these groups, or give them more and them less, and so on and so forth. So it becomes this very clever way in how you distribute resources, and how you give or take away access to resources, how you punish, how you reward, how you do all of these things. This is in the early stages of coming up. Nobody talks about it.
And is this
because nobody seems to have actually recognized that this is what is happening, but this is exactly what is going on.
Well, would you consider this, and I'm just thinking from the hip here, would you consider this to support or energize a free market economy? Or because this would appear to me, and again, just sort of at surface value, that this would place considerable pressure, downward pressure on
free market. I'm sorry to fall into your speech here. Free market economy is going to be a dead thing.
Mhm.
The free market, people immediately say, no, poverty, a breakdown of finance. There's the word free market economy actually will be a bad word in 10 years time, maybe 15 years time, maybe in 5 years time, maybe it's already today. Because when you say free market economy, immediately some of the more liberal friends immediately say, but free market economy causes this, that, the other thing, and so on and so forth. No, it's managed market economy. And managed market economy will be arranged through technology, through a very sophisticated matrix of mitigating between all these currencies, tokens, coins, cryptos, whatever you want to call them. And it will be extraordinarily complex to understand it. It will be more complex than our current derivative system, which is about to blow up, in thousand pieces. Mm-hmm. So we are actually seeing the foot soldiers, all of these people that create these currencies. Look, you can, for example, buy on websites today credits, and with these credits, then you can buy things in there. You can spend that money in there. So it's nothing other than that particular website has its own currency, its own tokens.
Yeah.
Now add to that non-fungible, and now you see it all come together.
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, I think. Although it falls into the category here.
It integrates very tightly into this tokenized economy. Okay. And where you then strike deals, you then can say, look, I have these 18 million technology tokens, which you can apply towards technology in the area of hydropower, solar power, and wind power. And I am buying with them, a participation, in the irrigation of agriculture tokens in whatever, the Great Valley in California or something like that. There will be, it will, first of all, the entire flow of money will become extraordinarily managed, very sophisticated, very opportunistic. The new finance is not do I sell Microsoft stock and buy IBM, or I buy a healthcare stock, or do this. I think stocks will be perceived as stupid investment after the next massive crash of the system itself.
We're really almost there now, aren't we? I mean,
we're almost there. But what will be the new stuff that people are going to trade is these tokenized, specialized value systems in which they exchange and where they make trades and so on and so forth. This is a whole new gold rush that is going to unfold after the next crash. But we are getting ready now already to build the early system. And when the system has evolved enough, it will bring down the current system. And so my message here is, watch the crypto world, watch the tokenized world, watch blockchain, watch all of these things, because they are now building the network structure that allows the old system to crash. And when it has developed enough and became sophisticated enough to actually manage global trade and global finance, the stocks, bonds, all of that stuff will go kaboom, finish.
So is it your view then, and this is, again, sort of a random discussion as we're moving around here, but is it your belief then that the new financial system will be a system that's built principally upon a chassis that is blockchain oriented?
Yeah, I think blockchain is an interesting concept that has still room to become much more sophisticated and become much more integrated and become more adaptable to very, very large systems. There are some limitations on blockchain, and I think they will be resolved by some clever technologists in the next even 2-3 years, I believe.
So given the system that you've just described, would it then be your view that a token like Bitcoin will disappear at some point, as it's designed to be a universal currency, a universal money, and not specialized to any particular use or purpose?
I think there is room for universal money to a degree. I think what Bitcoin is now and will in the future, it will be limited to where can it be accepted and for what. No? And I think future regulations of the regulatory bodies of the various societies of the world will focus on that. They will look at Bitcoin and say, well, okay, in our country, with Bitcoin, you can only buy cars and maybe farmlands, and that's it, nothing else. No.
So you're looking at a system really that's far more regulated than the current system.
Yes, of course. And here is another big trend that we need to understand. The more people we are, the more nodes are in the network, the more technological power, the more application, the faster the communication, the higher the risk for the system, the more regulation is needed. Our life was the most free probably in the 1960s and 1970s. Yeah. And I'm very happy I lived in that time. It was absolutely amazing, because where we are going to might be, if we do everything right and we are lucky, might be a clean, sustainable future. It might work excellent. We might eat healthy food. We may have great education and whatever have you. But freedom, I think, will be almost none. I think every footstep that we take, everything we do will be controlled and will be managed, just so that the risk is managed in how any individual can cause, major damage to the system. And that is where entertainment is starting to become very important. I think entertainment is going to be where the minds are still going to be free. Virtual reality, creating movies where you actually the participant and you can steer where the movie goes. These kind of fantasy worlds that we will be able to create technologically by just putting a head with a lot of
electrodes
on the skull will actually give people that amazing freedom that they not have in their actual life. It will be almost a little bit like the Matrix, where you are being that functional element within. Jobs, by the way, no one will have a job, because jobs will. I mean, the only reason why anyone still has a job is because it has not yet been replaced by technology. But as technology and robotics, especially, are mushrooming on this planet, which they do currently. We are certainly looking into a society where no one contributes anymore, or if they contribute, is because they're allowed to contribute, because they have earned the right to work. They have to earn the rights to contribute new ideas and so on and so forth. And this will be a small elite, and the rest, we will say, are they deserving to be fed by the system? Now, in a world where you have 10, 11, 14 billion people, we will look at this, unfortunately, in a way that is even today for us unthinkable. It will be a horror.
This sounds rather dystopian, no?
It is. But look, unless we somehow, by some miracle, falling back down to, I don't know, 2-3 billion people, on this planet, or even preferably like only 1 billion people on this planet, we are moving towards that point.
Can you repeat that?
Well, when I say preferable, not preferable by me, I'm a liberal tree hugger, but and I'm a Buddhist. I mean, how could I? But I'm saying preferable from the point of nature, looking at this element called humanity. And imagine you were an alien, you come from the outside, and you are a Buddhist alien, and you look at this planet from the outside. We have loads and loads of compassion, for the planet, for everything, for the leaves and for the bugs and the tigers and the elephants and also humans, and the humans are not any more important than the elephants and the bugs and the trees and whatever. So we're looking at this as one ecology. We're probably going to say, well, this species is overbearing. We got to scale that down, and this is where the preferable comes in, because a billion and a half probably is the right number of people on this planet. But obviously, you cannot ever get there. You cannot, unless something horror happen on its own. I don't think that humanity will ever start to create sort of a matrix of features of what is a desirable and an undesirable human, and then chop all the undesirable humans off the face of the earth.
A coal algorithm or something of some kind?
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm. That is just absolute the darkest futuristic movies that you can imagine. Yeah, but then again, we're making these kind of movies right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you
can conceive it.
No, look, all of the sci-fi stuff. Remember the sci-fi stuff we did in the 1800s? Where it was outrageous, or in the early 1900s, where even Star Trek, where you had this device where you're talking in, boom, you got the device now, we call the cell phone, no? So these I understand you have a little conversation about cell phones later, but these things are about to shape society. And when I look at how sci-fi was and how sci-fi is now, It is all this dystopian stuff. It is all this dark stuff. It's all this doomsday stuff. We are collectively expecting doomsday to happen because our fears are always best represented to the collective sci-fi stuff that we are creating, the movies, the picture, the books, the all of these things, the pictures. So we are moving towards some very incredible times, back to money, back to how is society regulated and so on and so forth. Yes, freedom is over. We need to literally regulate the movement of every loose part on this planet if we want to keep the planet in some kind of a sustainability equilibrium.
Let me ask you a question. There are 8 billion people in the world today. Do you think at any point, and we know that we're over consuming our planet's natural resources to an extent that will lead us to dystopia if we don't solve them, either through population reduction, which is not something that we would do as part of a culling process, as you've mentioned. It would be more either, I don't know, asteroid strike or nuclear event or probably something man-made, would pandemic, whatever, would seem to be more likely. In your view, with the world in its resource pool that it has, that we know it has, can we even support 8 billion people? I mean, in the future at some point, because we know the population will continue to grow, through the end of this century. What's the red line in the sand?
Chris, easily we can do that. Look, imagine all these office buildings we have today, okay, which we don't need. Who will be going to an office in 10 years from now? Come on, no one. We will have
10 years, I think, is maybe soon to.
We will have show offices, for board meetings and this kind of stuff, just to feed the fantasy of what has been. But even board meetings nowadays are done by Zoom.
But isn't there a cost to that? I mean, isn't there a cost of?
No, let me get to the point I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine we take all of these office buildings and all the parking structures and we turn them into vertical farming with precision drip irrigation of water that we draw from the humidity of the air, with very, very clever technologies such solar power and so on.
Sure, yeah.
And we feed the people right where they live.
Mm-hmm.
I can do fish farms, I can grow any salad, vegetable, whatever have you, in these high rises. Mm-hmm. I just turn them into vertical farms. Mm-hmm. No? Floor after floor. I can show you how I can feed an entire city like New York just with the buildings that are there that will be superfluous in only a few years from now, and still export vegetables. I mean, you could actually make the city of New York, Manhattan Island, could be a net vegetable exporter if you were applying all the new technologies that are available today. And there should be, for example, no reason why not every area that is exposed to the sky shouldn't be a solar panel. So you could bring way down the energy. Now, I'm not sure that solar panels are the last step in this. There might be other better ways in harvesting solar power. In technologies that are under development currently that are other than photovoltaic technologies. But the point I'm trying to make is the technological footprints that we have today would easily support a population of 20 billion or 25 billion. That is really not the problem. The problem is that we are wasting this planet away in ways that is just absolutely idiotic. There's a few things that we should reconsider, and one of them is the amount of beef we consume, because that really is heavy on our environment. But for any other protein, chicken, fish, these kind of things, or pork, although pork is on a diminishing popularity, as actually the majority of the planet becomes to be more non-pork eating, due to religious choices. But we are moving definitely along with technology, where the technology advances faster than the amount of people that we
consumption.
Exactly. The problem is people isn't to feed them. The problem with people is that people hate people. People just think there are too many, I'm sorry when I say that, too many rats in the box. The anxiety between people that are living too close in proximity of each other actually causes to lower the value of life. And today, the value of money is much higher than the value of life, because we are more than happy to risk life for money. Many wars are based on that, and so on. No? Yep. So that is the problem, is a social problem that we have. It is not actually the possibility that we are sustainably feed 10, 14, 20 billion people on this planet. But socially, it would be much healthier if we were, and I'm going back to what I said earlier, if we were 1 billion or 2 or maybe 3 at the most, because that way, I mean, when I was born, I thought there was a lot of people on this planet, and we were only 2 billion. We were only 2 billion, now we 8. And this is in my lifetime. No? So we have a social rejection of the overpopulation of the planet. Not so much that we cannot feed them, although we cannot feed them because we mismanage our resources. How do we do that? We do that simply by not planning properly, by we're throwing in Europe more food away than we consume every day. If we were just managing to give that food to the folks south, hunger would be solved. So it is actually that we do not properly manage the resources, and that we are not managing properly our social context, our social interaction with each other. That is the real problem.
And do you think this is going to be the last question here, and we'll sign off before we address just a couple of the questions here that have come in, because we're an hour and 10 minutes now. However, is it your view that humans will become a hybrid species at some point in the not too distant future? And is this one of the ways that we solve some of these problems of wastage, of error, of whatever, because we are human and we make mistakes? Because there's been a lot of discussion about this, and kind of a lot of this centrals around Elon Musk, and because he carries a lot of, he sucks a lot of oxygen, right?
Yeah, he does. And let me tell you something here on the whole hybrid discussion, okay? we become hybrids not because we want to.
Mhm.
We become because it just happens.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We are not going out there and saying, let's turn people into robots. Well, that sounds awful, but understand there's a thing here, this little device here, okay? I take that device away from you, you lost. You completely lost, no?
And just
Well,
like that,
exactly. This
20
device
years.
here is about to merge with you, okay? Before that, remember when we had the first cell phones, there were huge boxes. I remember I had one of these devices back in the 1980s, early 1980s, and the damn thing was 17,000 euros. $70,000 in California. Huh? And you could only use it in some parts of Los Angeles. And it was extraordinarily expensive to make a phone call of a minute. It was just crazy, no? And then we had these bones, and then they became smaller and smaller and so on. No? And then suddenly they became computers.
Yeah.
I mean, do you understand that in this device here, this little device here, there is about 35 to 40 times the computational power that NASA had in total to put the man on the moon.
Yeah, it's astonishing.
And you have that amount of, and actually, if you now go iPhone 12, 13, you talking about machines that were supercomputers in a server room only 10 years earlier. Okay? So the device is becoming rapidly smaller and smaller, and they become integrated with us. They will be in our contact lenses, they will be in our glasses, they will be embedded, they will be embedded in our skull, there will be microchips that we accept and do, and so on and so forth. And yes, there is all this debate about we don't want to be chip people and all of these things, but the debate will go away, and it will go, and we accept that. And you know how it goes away? It goes away by consumer choice, not by government saying you must wear a microchip. It is, hey, if you wear this microchip, you're really cool because suddenly your phone works in your mind, and you just think you want to make that call, and boom, it rings in your ear, and you have that voice of the person directly piped into your hearing nerve, that connects to your brain. That is the future of communication anyway. So in order to be consumer choice drives us to become hybrids. Now, cyborgs, or whatever you want to call it. Knees, you can now replace knees, hips, all kinds of pieces. Organs, we can create them outside of a body and so on and so forth, We are fully in the progress, but it's not because there is this, evil scientist somewhere in some high-rise thinking about how to create cyborgs or whatever.
It'll be for
consumer choice.
Performance benefits, aesthetic benefits.
Consumer choice, absolutely. Consumer choice. That's what it is. That's what drives all the technology.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, listen, Hardy, just a few questions that have come in prior to our podcast, and one of the questions actually kind of touches on a little bit what we talked about. This is from Robert in Las Vegas, who has asked who the GOP candidate will be in 2024. And we've had a little bit of discussion about this ourselves anyway, about, and certainly even on US level and global level, is the reemergence of Donald Trump, going to be lasting? And what does that look like? I mean, there are other things happening too in the United States.
Mr. Trump delivered yesterday one of the most important campaign promises, even so he's no longer president. He delivered by the appointment of 3 super conservative judges on the US Supreme Court. He delivered the most important promise that he made to the evangelists and to the extreme conservatives to end Roe versus Wade and to begin to bring about a fragmentation of conservative cells, Florida, Atlanta, whatever you want to call it, which finally provides the kind of choice of lifestyle that they feel is the correct one, whether for religious reasons or political or other, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So it would be very surprising, especially when you hear in the last 24 hours all the praise that has been already done from Mr. Trump. It will be highly surprising if he is not the candidate in 2024. Very surprising. Because he wants his 4 more years. He wants that.
Of course.
And I believe...
At least 4 more years, you mean?
Yes. I believe that the split of the country, I believe that he will have a hard time winning because women are absolutely, completely livid about this. And yes, there's a lot of conservative women voices out there that say this is wonderful that this happened and so on and so forth. But I believe that the really super populous population states like California and New York and so on and so forth, that they will under very heavy participation of women will shape the democratic choice. There may be even a woman president candidate emerging within the democratic lines. Who that is, I don't know yet. But will Trump be the front man for the Republicans? I don't think Cruz is going to run again.
DeSantis, he's ahead in a couple of polls just recently, and I mean, whereas 2 years ago in the 2020 election,
I like to look at that in a week from now, when this whole Roe versus Wade thing has settled in, and then look at this. At this stage right now, I still believe there is a strong probability that the front man still will be Mr. Trump, unless they manage to convict him on some crime in the meantime and make him so no longer be eligible to be a president. Yeah. Then that would be a different story. But until that happens, I believe he has a strong voice. And watch him campaigning very soon on that
Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
He will actually use the point by saying, look, I didn't take anything away from women. All I did is I gave the states a choice to where the majority of the women also is conservative to protect their side, and others that want to be liberal to do that. I'm the one who brought you democracy. That's what he will say. Whether that is really essentially true or not is a different story. But this will be the argument he will be using. Next question.
If you're right, the women do come out and vote, and I think it goes without saying that we will have a higher proportion of eligible women voters out voting this year in the United States, or in 2024 rather. But it'll have to be in the swing states. I mean, New York and California, where the bulk of the population of the country resides, those are largely blue states anyway. So it'll have to be in the swing states, and that'll be really kind of an interesting thing to observe, because you're right. There are a lot of conservative voters, a lot of conservative women voters, but I think it will be the younger voters, where there's a larger proportion of the population who tend not to vote as much. If this causes them to come out and vote, I think you're right. I think it will be
needless to say that the showdown between liberal and conservative, especially on that issue, may derail the whole election itself. It will be so tumultuous that we find that it is almost not possible to hold an election. We have to delay it. We have to figure out how do we do it. No, it will be tumultuous. It will be quite incredible.
More than 2016 and more than 2020. I wholly agree.
Yeah. I think you got some more questions from people, no?
Yeah, Robert had one other question, and that was who will be the president in 2024 if there's an election.
If there's an election, well, I haven't seen the counter proposal yet, but
let's put it this way: if Trump if he's not indicted or if he's not prosecuted, either, and he is the front runner, let's say he's the GOP nominee.
He stands a high chance. Now, remember, when people answer this question, they usually answer it in what they prefer and wish would be happening. No, Trump will not win. This is because they don't want him to win. Do I want him to win? Well, I'm an apolitical person. I don't get involved in this question. Do I believe he will win? Very, very strong contender for a win. Very strong contender. But you can be one thing sure: you will have to count the votes next time, because every single vote may decide who is going to be president. It may be coming down to one vote,
which would only cause to the tumult.
Which only, no question. Yes, absolutely.
Saad from Cairo, where do you see North Africa in 20 years on the world stage?
North Africa.
North Africa specifically versus.
So Northern Africa, that means Sahara Africa.
He's from Cairo. I think he's probably wanting to know where Egypt maybe falls in the mix with its population growth and.
Yes. Well, so we have, obviously a country with quite substantial oil resources, which is Libya. We have, all kinds of problems that need to be settled out there. Your timeline was 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
And I think that I think Libya will in 20 years' time hopefully have at least come to the level of Morocco in terms of functional society. Will they play a big role? I think they will play a big role as becoming even more important in terms of building a Islamic fundamental base of land that they cover. I believe that Sahara Africa is spreading the Quran more effectively into Africa, reversing all the missionary work that was done during the colonialism by Christians. I would imagine that over the next 20 years, Africa will become mostly Islamic. And I believe it because of that, and this is not just Northern Africa, but then all of Africa will be able to act more as one, the United States of Africa, no? And
Really?
I think that will perhaps be Northern Africa's role to play. They will not effectively play that role if they are not solving their own political infighting and problems. But if they can do that, then Libya could be one that finally manages that. Then I would imagine that that whole bridge from Egypt all the way to Morocco is starting to export
Unify.
more and more the ideas and so on. So yeah, I think Africa will be all Islamic, perhaps with some pockets left in South Africa that are or Namibia possibly. That will remain,
Christian.
yeah. But I think that will be mostly the trend that Northern Africa is supporting.
Okay. One last question, Hardy. This is from Hidalgo in Portugal, and it's kind of interesting. A Portuguese fellow asking this question. Hidalgo's question is, will China's government be able to satisfy its population's social demands in the future where it becomes harder to limit the flow of information? I think he's making the assumption that, well, true, certainly to some extent that the narratives in China are very closely controlled, but, with the opening up of information or the maybe becoming more difficult to limit information into out of.
So, interesting again here is that China isn't actually doing anything so differently than what we do in the West. Except in the West, it's consumer choice. It's tracking the people through their economic behavior. And in China, it's through their social behavior. But they kind of do the same thing. And I do believe that each system will learn from the other and actually widen this trend rather than to curtail this trend. Just as I said earlier, the freedom of choice on anything is going to be limited through entertainment and fantasy and interactive movies. But I believe that the actual life of people will be extraordinarily governed, technologically governed by the need of sustainability, the need of resource management, the need of all of these things, if we want to survive on this planet at all.
The consumer, as you mentioned, consumer behaviors, consumer demands are really what drive the systems we use, the laws we have, generally the assignment of resource, etc.
Let's just to add for our listeners here, one more example. In the very early days of the internet, the number one technology driver was the pornographic industry. About in the early days of the internet, let's say the first 5 years, between 60 and 75% of the content was related to pornography. Soft porn, hard porn, whatever, okay?
Mhm.
And many of the technologies that had to do with video, real-time, that's real-time that, choices, this, click here, click there, then it connects you with this, with that, and this, and whatever. All of
Processing power.
that was developed through that industry that nobody wanted to admit. Oh, me? No, I never look at this kind of stuff, But I don't know, 75% of the content was that, and so you see, there is then all this technology today. Today it's a lot less. Today I think it's 20 or 30%, but the technologies that were developed during that time and were really pushed, they were pushed because everybody wanted to, look at the forbidden stuff, and or the stuff that they didn't want their neighbor to know about, they were looking at. And something similar is happening now. We have all these technologies being pushed by better serving consumers, by knowing, this guy wants to buy a motorcycle, and he probably, when he buys his helmet, he's going to buy a blue helmet with a red stripe, and it probably has 3 stars on the side and some message, or whatever. And we know all of these things today because we have learned to track them so perfectly and to quantify and qualify them, and we understand exactly what they want. So that technology is easily now adaptable to manage them socially, manage them politically, manage their votes, and so on and so forth. And at some point, Chris, it becomes superfluous to vote, because almost no vote will occur anywhere in the world that isn't or cannot be, or most likely is, manipulated through computer organized media and through AI. And I'm sorry, when AI finally has eroded your free choice completely, because you don't know anymore that actually what you want is completely introduced into you through all of these messagings and all of these things, voting is superfluous. We already know what's going to win. The computer already voted for you. He voted how you think, what news you hear and which you don't, and so on and so forth. So we are in this really big change that is occurring right now. What remains to be seen is if the planet survives at all, or if the planet survives with only 500 million people left on it. And depends on that, we will then look again in just a few years down the road what the future holds. But what it holds for right now is some great turmoil and some great change that will unfold in this next few years.
So to kind of summarize, Hardy, what I'm hearing from you is that it's your view that there will be significant change coming in the course of probably even our lifetimes, but certainly for Gen X, Gen Z, and that much of what will happen in the future will be dependent upon some sort of an event that causes us or forces us to reconsider everything.
When you say event, it will be maybe dozens of events that together build the perfect storm
And we have that.
to one composite event. And it cashes in on the ripeness of all of these systems fatiguing and the possibility to pick up on new systems to take over. I mentioned earlier, currencies will become tokens and managed tokens and all of these things. So that is basically the big picture that we are facing right now.
The macro view of the world. So from 35,000 feet, Hardy, let's check out for the session here tonight. I'm Chris Edwards, signing off with Dr. Hardy Schloer from our first special edition podcast of 2022 for the Club of Amsterdam and our good friend and colleague, Felix Bopp. Look forward to seeing you all again sometime soon here in the not too distant future in what would be our second. Good night and good luck.
Thank you and goodbye.
Good night, Hardy.